From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me from Washington here on Firstpost America. Welcome to Firstpost America. I'm Eric Ham in Washington, D.C. Donald Trump targeted again, and Kamala Harris is on the hot seat. We'll get you caught up on all the latest stories, but first, here's a look at the latest headlines. The Yemen-based Houthis hit central Israel using a ballistic missile, leaving several wounded. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows retaliation. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer meets his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni in Rome. The two leaders discuss illegal immigration a day after a boat carrying migrants capsized in the English Channel, claiming 8 lives. The Philippines recalls its ship anchored at a disputed island in the South China Sea. Beijing claims Manila's ship was illegally occupying a reef that belongs to China. Typhoon Yi brings incessant rainfall and floods to Myanmar, killing over 100 and forcing 300,000 to evacuate. Yi has been named Asia's strongest typhoon of the year after it made landfall last week. And a fuel truck explosion kills at least 24 in the Caribbean nation of Haiti. According to the emergency responders, at least 40 people are in critical condition with severe burn wounds. We begin in the United States, where former President Donald Trump was targeted in another assassination attempt. Officers from the Federal Bureau of Investigation say the Republican presidential nominee was playing golf at his golf club in West Palm Beach, Florida, when they spotted the muzzle of an assault rifle sticking through the bushes aimed at Donald Trump nearly 400 yards away. Secret Service agents fired multiple shots at the gunman as he fled in an SUV, leaving behind his rifle, 2 backpacks, a long-range scope, and a GoPro camera. The suspect, who has now been identified as Ryan Wesley Ruth, was stopped and arrested by law enforcement officials in a neighboring county.
We have somebody in custody right now that is a potential suspect. We got a little bit more work to do on it, but as we usually do, as soon as we decide that we're going to book him into the county jail and the charges that he's going to be booked into, we'll get those to you and we'll get a picture of him and we'll get you his background.
Records show the 58-year-old Ruth has lived his whole life in North Carolina. He frequently posts content about the war in Ukraine on his social media accounts. Ruth also has a history of multiple run-ins with law enforcement and was convicted in 2002 for possessing a weapon of mass destruction. Following this latest incident, Donald Trump sent out an email to his supporters saying, quote, "There were gunshots in my vicinity, but before rumors start spiraling out of control, I wanted you to hear this first. I am safe and well," end quote. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris have condemned the incident and voiced their concern about the safety of the former president. World leaders, too, have spoken about the incident, with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese being the first to condemn the assassination attempt.
Everyone wants the democratic process to be peaceful and to be orderly. This incident in the United States is of concern again. It is good that President Trump has said that he is safe and that the incident, the details of which are still coming out, so it's not quite clear all of those details. But what is clear is that President Trump is safe. That is a good thing.
Now, since the latest assassination attempt, Donald Trump has returned to his MaraLago estate in Florida and has been advised by Secret Service to only visit the West Palm Beach golf course with a larger security detail.
Well, you got to understand the golf course is surrounded by shrubbery. So when somebody gets into the shrubbery, they're pretty much out of sight. All right. And at this level that he is at right now, he's not the sitting president. If he was, we would have had this entire golf course around it. But because he's not, the security is limited to the areas that the Secret Service deems possible. So I would imagine that the next time he comes to the golf course, there'll probably be a little bit more people around the perimeter.
Yesterday's assassination attempt has become the second security incident concerning the former president as he seeks re-election to the White House. On July 13th, Donald Trump survived another assassination attempt while addressing a public rally in Pennsylvania where a bullet grazed his ear. The ex-president has not announced any changes to his presidential campaign and is set to speak live on social media platform X tonight. And staying in the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris is facing backlash over her recent remarks on the U.S. military's activity abroad. During her debate with Donald Trump last week, the vice president implied there were no American soldiers deployed in overseas conflict zones. Kamala Harris said, quote, "As of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in an active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world. The first time this century," end quote. Now, according to the Department of Defense, the U.S. is not directly engaged in a war, nor are U.S. soldiers fighting in active war zones. However, some military service members are indeed stationed in areas that the United States considers combat zones. Around 2,500 troops are in Iraq and Syria to fight against Islamic State militants. Thousands of service members have also been deployed to the Middle East after the war in Gaza erupted in October of last year. Meanwhile, several U.S. military personnel have been killed or injured this year, including in Jordan, Syria, and off the coast of Somalia. Now, in response to the vice president's comments, several troops wearing combat gear have posted sarcastic videos questioning if she knew their locations. Now, it remains unclear whether these troops are deployed in any of the designated combat zones. However, Republican lawmakers claim the troops are deployed in the Middle East. Meanwhile, families of the U.S. soldiers killed or injured in combat zones have been outraged by the Democratic presidential nominee's remarks as well. Speaking to a news outlet, a family said false claims by Kamala Harris hit below the belt and that she was trying to deceive the public. Now, Kamala Harris and her campaign are yet to clarify her stance on the latest controversy, which has potentially harmed her image among those serving in the military. And moving to South America, Venezuela has arrested 3 Americans, 2 Spaniards, and 1 Czech citizen for allegedly plotting to assassinate Nicolas Maduro. The Venezuelan government also seized 400 rifles, claiming the foreigners wanted to destabilize the country through violent actions.
This is part of a network that we have already identified. A group of people detained here in Venezuela are part of this network. Then we conducted raids based on information about individuals possessing rifles in their homes. Groups with 10 to 12 rifles actively linked to the violent acts they were planning.
Caracas also claimed that the alleged operation was being led by the United States Central Intelligence Agency.
The U.S. should clarify the use of its territory for weapons trafficking aimed at overthrowing a democratically elected government.
However, Washington has rejected the claims as categorically false, saying it supports a democratic solution to the political crisis in Venezuela. So far, the State Department has confirmed that one of the detainees in Venezuela is in fact a former U.S. Navy SEAL. Meanwhile, the Venezuelan government also asserted the detainees from Spain were linked to Madrid's National Intelligence Center. The announcement of these arrests comes amid a feud between Maduro's government with both the United States and Spain. In fact, last Thursday, Washington announced sanctions against 16 allies of Nicolas Maduro over his disputed victory in the July presidential election. Venezuelan officials criticized the sanctions, saying Maduro's government would not succumb to blackmail.
Somos chantajeables. We are not blackmailable. And we do not allow ourselves to be intimidated by the imperial scum. This is why we will always stand by your side, to support you in this and all battles to come. Because whoever offends and sullies any of us, will find us all to defend them. We stand in perfect civil-military union, attentive to any kind of threat against the freedom, independence, and sovereignty of the nation.
On Friday, Venezuela summoned the Spanish ambassador in Caracas after Spain's defense minister described the Maduro government as a dictatorship. This occurred days after Venezuela's opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez fled to Spain to claim political asylum after an arrest warrant was issued for him by Venezuela's Supreme Court. Maduro is already facing international condemnation over the contested election, and the latest arrest has only exacerbated tensions between Venezuela and Western nations far more than expected. And now moving to Europe, catastrophic floods caused by Storm Boris are wreaking havoc across central and eastern regions. Several people have drowned and thousands have been evacuated from their homes in Austria, Poland, Romania, and the Czech Republic. Entire towns are submerged, power outages abound, and the situation continues to worsen with more rain expected. Here's more on the catastrophic storm.
Storm Boris has unleashed a devastating wave of destruction across Central and Eastern Europe, leaving death and chaos in its wake. In a harrowing turn of events, at least 8 people have drowned in Austria, Poland and Romania, while 4 others remain missing in the Czech Republic. Austrian authorities have declared the entire Lower Austria province a disaster zone, with forecasters predicting no change in weather patterns until Tuesday.
The situation during the night, and this morning was pretty dramatic. But luckily the firefighters have already given the all-clear regarding the river. The groundwater is still a problem and we have no power.
Poland has not been spared either. In the Kloczko region, Prime Minister Donald Tusk declared a natural disaster after 1 person drowned and 1,600 people were evacuated. The army has been brought in to assist with the rescue efforts, but in many areas, roads have been washed away. Power is down and whole communities have been cut off. In Kloczko, the mayor admitted, "We have lost the battle against the flood." Now across the border, the Czech Republic was also enduring some of the worst rainfall in its history. In the north of the Czech Republic, helicopters were deployed to evacuate stranded citizens. While in the south, residents put up a wall of sandbags roughly 500 meters long in an effort to hold back the rising waters.
The firefighters managed it very perfectly, especially the volunteer firefighters from Predlenki, who devoted 3 days to it both with preparations and beyond. Otherwise, I'm a category here, so we're on a hill, but I feel sorry for the neighbors. That's about it. They also remember the flood, 2 previous floods. The first one was much bigger.
In Romania, at least 6 people have died as the Galați region was submerged. A team of volunteers scooped water away from houses with buckets as mud-covered belongings lay outside. Romania's Secretary of State for Emergency Situations said that living containers will be made available to some displaced people until they can return home.
It destroyed everything. I don't have anything left. The beds are filled with mud. The pillows are filled and I have nowhere to sleep. It's a disaster, there's nothing else to say. The water came from behind the house. It came from the other direction, too. Tonight we will sleep in the street in the car, we have nowhere else to go.
Meanwhile, the rain shows no signs of stopping. Emergency services are stretched thin, with over 5,000 interventions in Austria alone. Hungary, Slovakia and even southern Germany are bracing for further flooding as rivers swell to dangerous levels. In Budapest, officials are anxiously watching the Danube, which is expected to reach near record levels later this week. So as the waters continue to rise, hope is fading for many trapped in their homes. The storm, fueled by a deadly combination of warm Mediterranean air and cold northern winds, has caused rainfall levels unheard of in recent history. This catastrophic event highlights the increasing frequency of extreme weather, a tragic reminder of our changing climate.
And finally, NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore were supposed to be back on Earth months ago, but a series of technical issues with Boeing's Starliner spacecraft has kept them aboard the International Space Station far longer than expected. Apart from missing their families, the duo faced the challenges of exposure to microradiations, declining bone density, and decreasing cognitive activity. Our final story provides the latest on their continuing ordeal.
NASA astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore were set for a quick trip to space. But their mission turned into an unexpected 8-month adventure. In a recent interview from the International Space Station, or the ISS, the duo shared what it's like to live in space longer than planned.
So, yeah, it's been quite an evolution over the last 3 months. We've been involved from the beginning through all the processes of assessing our spacecraft, Calypso, and it was trying at times. There were some tough times all the way through. You certainly, as the commander and the PLT of your spacecraft, you don't want to see it go off without you.
The troubles for the duo began in June when 5 of the Starliner's 28 thrusters failed, stranding them 250 miles above Earth.
Progress just about home.
The spacecraft they were supposed to use to return home had other plans, leaving them orbiting the planet and adding months to their mission. But both Williams and Wilmore took it in their stride.
Obviously, when you have an issues like we've had, there's some changes that need to be made. We found some things that we just could not get comfortable with putting us back in the Starliner when we had other options. There's many cases in the past where there have not been other options. We were very fortunate that we have the space station and that we had the option to stay and we had the option to come back a different way if that's what the data shows.
While the daily lives of the NASA astronauts revolves around working out ways to get back home, the duo are also keeping their spirits high with focusing a lot on their fitness and even casting their vote in the upcoming US presidential election.
This is my happy place. I love being up here in space. It's just fun. You know, every day you do something that's work, quote unquote. You can do it upside down. You can do it sideways. So it adds a little different perspective. And you know, about staying up here longer, one of the things I was sort of regretting about a short duration flight is I wasn't going to be able to share it with a lot of people.
I sent down my request for a ballot today, as a matter of fact, and they should get it to us in a couple of weeks. And absolutely, yes, it's a very important role that we all play as citizens is to be included in those elections, and NASA makes it very easy for us to do that. So we're excited about that opportunity.
I think you're glad we're not with you anymore.
Now, apart from casting the ballot, Sunita Williams is also set to celebrate her 59th birthday aboard the ISS on September 19th. This will be the second time the astronaut will celebrate her birthday in space. Meanwhile, back on Earth, SpaceX has emerged as a promising contender to bring Williams and Wilmore back home. Just recently, billionaire Jared Isaacman and his crew made headlines with their safe return from a 5-day mission that pushed them higher into space than anyone has traveled since the Apollo days.
3 out.
The crew splashed down in the Gulf of Mexico, marking another win for SpaceX, which has become NASA's go-to company for reliable space travel.
Starliner is back.
SpaceX's Dragon capsule is now scheduled to bring Wilmore and Williams back to Earth in February 2025, officially taking over the job from Boeing after the Starliner's troubles. Boeing, once the dominant player in space, has been struggling to get its Starliner program back on track. Their uncrewed test mission ended safely in New Mexico recently, but the thruster failures that plagued the spacecraft are still under investigation. Boeing has racked up over $1.6 billion in costs trying to fix the Starliner's issues. And with NASA leaning more on SpaceX, its future in space is unclear. But despite these hiccups, Williams and Wilmore remain upbeat. They're focused on the task at hand, shrugging off the uncertainty of their return.
That's our show for today. We certainly thank you so much for tuning in. We hope to see you right back here again tomorrow. Thanks again for watching. From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired!
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill,